Giant Zulu sisters asked for shelter in his lodge. What they did to the lumberjack left him speechless. By the time he heard the first knock, the wind was howling so hard it made the walls tremble. Elias thought it was just another gust throwing a fistful of snow at the north wall, so he kept his hands wrapped around the tin mug and his eyes on the fire. The second knock shook the door on its hinges, slow, heavy, like someone careful not to break it. He set the mug down and rose, joints cracking after 14 hours in the woods. Outside, the blizzard snarled and scratched at the shutters. No man had any business walking in that cold. Not at this hour. Not this far from town. The third knock came like a judgment. "Hold," he called, voice rough from sawdust and smoke. "I'm coming." The latch was half frozen. He pulled it hard, then harder, and the door jerked open. Wind punched inside, bringing a spray of needles and snow. The fire behind him shuddered. For a second, all he saw was white and swirling dark, shapes without meaning dot, and they stepped out of the storm. Two women stood in the doorway, snow packed on their lashes, cloaks stiff with ice. They were tall, taller than any man in camp, maybe taller than he was, and Elias was not a small man. Their shoulders filled the frame, one behind the other, blocking the night. The one in front raised her chin. Her skin was deep and dark, almost blue in the lamplight. The whites of her eyes shone sharp against it. Her cheekbones were high, jaw strong, mouth chapped from cold. Snow clung to the tight braids pinned against her skull, and frost glittered along the edges of a thin headscarf that had no right surviving in this climate. "Please," she said, each syllable careful, shaped by an accent the woods had never heard. "Shelter." Her voice was low, steady, and worn thin by travel. The wind tried to shoulder past them. Elias stepped aside before he had time to think. "Get in here," he said, "both of you, quickly." They moved like they had done this before, slipping through narrow spaces, bodies turned to protect the burden between them. Only then did he notice the roll of canvas on the taller one's back, the bundle at the other's hip. Axe handles and rifle stocks he knew by heart. This was different. Long, wrapped, heavy. The door slammed shut on the storm. The room shrank back to its usual size, low beams and rough-cut planks and the smell of pine pitch. The lamplight caught on their faces. They did not seem smaller away from the snow. They seemed larger. The second woman pulled back her hood. She was as tall as her sister, but built broader in the shoulders, muscles rising under the rough wool. Her hair was braided close to the scalp, then bound into a knot at the back. A pale scar curved from her left eye down toward her jaw, old and healed, like a white river on dark rock. She said nothing, only looked around the cabin with slow, measuring eyes. The kind of eyes men used on trees before deciding where to set the saw. "You shouldn't be out in that," Elias said. "Storm will strip the skin off your bones." The first woman glanced toward the rattling window. "We had nowhere else," she answered. "Your lodge." "We saw the smoke." "Camp's 3 miles downriver," he said. "You passed lights." "No one opened," the second woman said quietly, speaking for the first time. Her northern tongue was clumsier, but her meaning was sharp. "We knocked. They looked. They shut the doors." Elias felt his jaw tighten. He could picture it. Men huddled around potbelly stoves, listening to knocks they pretended were the wind. Foremen who didn't want trouble from the company. Crews who had never seen women like these and did not want to start. He'd done his share of looking away. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the rough bench by the fire. "You'll thaw faster? Names?" The first woman laid a hand on her sister's arm, guiding her forward. They moved with a compact grace, like they had spent years adjusting their bodies to smaller spaces than they deserved. "I am Namusa," she said. "This is Thandeka. We are sisters." He nodded once. "Elias." Namusa repeated it under her breath, tasting the sound. Thandeka just watched him. Her gaze was not hostile, not exactly, but it weighed him like a bean scale, noting every notch. Their cloaks were useless, meant for milder winters and ocean away. Underneath, they wore garments stitched from whatever they could find: coarse wool, canvas, bits of plaid like the camp workers wore. Men's coats cut down to fit their frames, laced tight at the waist. Their boots were cracked. Their socks were layers of cloth, wrapped and re-wrapped. "How far you walked in that?" he asked. Namusa's mouth tightened. "From the tracks 2 days. Before that." She let the words trail off. There was a long road behind the silence. Thandeka shrugged off the canvas roll from her back with a soft grunt. For a moment, Elias thought it was a rifle case. But when the fabric folded open, he saw wooden shafts and bright steel heads, wrapped in oilcloth and stringed out axes, 6 of them. Good ones. He stepped closer without meaning to. The handles were carved by a precise hand, grain running straight, polished smooth. Each head was ground clean, edges catching the light like a thin breath of ice. Namusa watched his expression. "We work," she said simply. "We pay for fire and space." Elias let out a slow breath. He looked from the axes to their faces. "Who told you there was work here?" "Men on the ship," Thandeka said. "They said, 'North, timber.'" Strong arms needed. Namusa's eyes flicked to the scars on Elias's knuckles, to the rope burns near his wrists, to the bruised half-moons where the peavy bit into his palm. "We have strong arms." Elias pictured the cookhouse, all those men hunched over stew. He pictured the foreman's cold, thin eyes, the company books locked in a metal box. There were rules about who swung what, who got paid, who didn't. He rubbed his jaw, feeling the rasp of beard. "Company doesn't hire women," he said finally. "Not for the saws, not for felling." Thandeka's stare sharpened. "We crossed oceans," she said. "We buried our brothers on roads you have never seen." Her voice did not rise, but it carried a weight that filled the room. "We will not bake bread for men who shut doors in our faces." The fire popped sharply. Outside, the wind clawed at the walls. Namusa leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "You are a lumberjack," she said. It wasn't a question. Her gaze had taken in the peavy in the corner, the stack of steel wedges. Near the door, the worn boots and the sawdust ground into every seam of his coat. "You go out tomorrow." "Yes, then we go with you." He almost laughed. The sound died in his throat when he saw they were not bluffing. "Do you know what a tree weighs?" he said instead. "You know what happens when you cut wrong?" "Yes," Thandeka said. "It falls. It kills you." Her expression did not change. "We are not children." Namusa looked past him to the wall, where a rough map was tacked, showing river bends and marked parcels of timber. "We do not ask for your company's permission," she said. "Only for your shelter tonight, and directions. We will find work. Somewhere. Somewhere." In a land that had already closed its doors, Elias thought of the letter folded in his trunk, the one that had arrived 3 winters ago and never been answered. He thought of his brother's handwriting, shaky from drink, asking if there was room for one more in the north. He had not sent an answer. His brother had died south, in a city street, face down in his own sick. Rumor, not news. But it had stuck like a splinter. Maybe he was tired of shutting doors. "You can stay the night," he said. "That much I can decide." He nodded toward the X's. "Let me see what you can do in the morning." No promises beyond that. Namusa's shoulders loosened a fraction. "We understand," she said. "THAND." I grunted. It might have been thanks, or simple acknowledgement that the next test was still to come. He pulled extra blankets from the trunk-worn wool and fur, smelling faintly of smoke, and spread them near the stove. Their faces registered approval, but not relief. These were women who knew how quickly warmth could vanish. "You eat?" he asked. Namusa shook her head. "Not since light," she said. "2 mornings ago." He swore under his breath and ladled out the rest of his stew. Potatoes, a bit of salt pork, onions cooked down until they had no color left. It wasn't much. He split a hard loaf 3 ways. Thandeka ate with slow, precise bites, like someone used to rationing by instinct. Namusa closed her eyes briefly. Between spoonfuls, not in gratitude, but in concentration, as if her body needed instructions to accept the food. "You came from far south," Elias said when the worst edge of their hunger was gone. Namusa's spoon hesitated. "Yes, ships bring timber crews," he said. "Also men for the mines. I never heard of them bringing." He stopped himself before saying, "Women like you," hearing the clumsy shape of it. Thandeka finished for him. "They did not bring us," she said. "We followed. The regiments," Namusa added quietly. "The men who took our land needed more men. They paid us to wash their clothes and carry their burdens. Then the war burned out. They did not need us anymore. We were already far from home. We kept walking." Elias listened. The wind outside filled the pauses in their story like a river roaring under ice. "They said in the north there was work." Namusa continued. "Where there are trees, there is always work." "That part's true," Elias said. His voice came out softer than he intended. He showed them how to bank the fire for the night, how to pack the ashes so the coals would last till morning. Thandeka watched his hands closely. Namusa watched his face. "Sleep," he said. "Dawn comes early here." "We know dawn," Thandeka murmured. He lay on his bunk with his back to the wall, listening to the small sounds of strangers settling into his space. Fabric shifting. Quiet murmurs in a language that flowed like low singing. The sigh of a body finally allowed to lie down indoors. He stared at the ceiling beams. The idea of taking them with him into the forest felt like holding a lit lamp in a dry barn. Everything in this place depended on men doing what was expected, on everyone knowing their place and staying in it. But the last thing he saw before sleep dragged him under was Thandeka's hands resting lightly over the bundled axes. As if she believed steel was the only promise the world still honored, morning came sharp and blue, the air cold enough to burn the inside of his nose. The storm had passed in the night, leaving the world buried and still. Smoke from distant camp chimneys rose straight up into the pale sky. Namusa and Thandeka were already awake, sitting cross-legged near the stove, braids neat, boots laced tight. They had risen before him, his own kind of religion. He felt a flicker of respect he hadn't planned to feel. "You sure about this?" he asked, pulling on his coat. Thandeka rose in one fluid motion, the axes over her shoulder. "We do not cross half the world to wait by the fire," she said. Namusa smiled, quick and hard. "Show us your trees, Elias." He opened the door. The cold rushed in like a wall. The women walked straight into it, heads high. For the first time since he'd come north, Elias wondered if the forest might be the easier of the 2 worlds waiting outside. Snow squeaked under their boots, that high dry sound of deep cold. Breath hung in the air, thick and white, then tore away in the faint breeze. The world was nothing but white and black, and the distant groan of trees settling under their own weight. Elias broke trail, legs driving through drifts up to his knees. He moved with the economy of long practice, shoulders rolling, feet careful on the hidden dips. Behind him, he heard their steps fall into rhythm, 2 distinct cadences made steady by effort. "You keep up all right?" he called over his shoulder. "Yes," Thandeka answered. No brag, no strain in her voice. Just fact. He glanced back anyway. Snow dusted their brows, clung to their lashes. They moved with a kind of stubborn patience, leaning into the cold, bodies compacted against the wind. The axes rode their shoulders like old friends. "You'll warm soon enough," he said. "Trees are an honest furnace." The Muse's lips quirked. "We used to say that about war," she murmured. He pretended not to hear. They dropped off the ridge toward the river. The ice lay thick and silent between its banks, covered with fresh powder, the current a muffled dream underneath. The stand he'd been working was just beyond the bend tall spruce and pine, marked with the company's bright orange slash. A good parcel. Cleaned out as they approached, the forest woke up. Trunks rose like pillars, bark rough and dark against the snow. Limbs creaked overhead, dropping fine showers of crystals. Ravens watched from high branches, heads cocked, black eyes bright with cold intelligence. Elias stopped at the edge of the cut, chest heaving a little. He gestured with his chin toward the nearest marked tree. 70 feet, maybe more, he said. "You fell that wrong. It doesn't care who you are. It just comes down." The Muse's eyes traced the trunk from ground to crown. Her gaze paused on the orange slash, then on the way the tree leaned ever so slightly toward the river. "You speak as if it listens," she said. "It doesn't," Elias replied. "That's the point." Thandeka stepped closer, boots crunching. She circled the tree once, palm brushing rough bark, checking lean and swell. He recognized the habit. Before men felled anything, they walked around it. They listened with their bodies. "You used axes?" He asked before he could stop himself. "On thick roots and hard ground," she said, "to clear space for guns and graves." The words were flat, scraped clean of drama. Wood is wood. He unhooked his own axe from its loop, the haft worn perfectly to his grip. "Different game here," he said. "Snow changes things. Cold changes things. Listen close." He showed them the face cut first. How to sight the fall, how to choose the side, how to angle the notch so the tree knew where to go. He drove his axe in with practiced strokes. The sound rang through the clear air, sharp and satisfying. Chips flew, bright yellow against the snow. Sap smell rose fresh and sharp. "You see?" he said, breath smoking. "You tell it a story with every cut. This way, not that." Namusa watched his hands, eyes narrowed in concentration. Thandeka watched the trembling along the trunk. When he'd carved the open mouth of the notch, he stepped back, letting his breath settle. "Now the back cut," he said, "but not too deep. You want a hinge." He struck carefully, feeling each bite. The tree answered with faint groans. Snow sifted from high branches. "Timber!" he shouted, voice cutting through the frozen morning. The tree leaned, slow at first, then with gathering conviction. It went exactly where he wanted, down toward the cleared lane, crown smashing into the snow with a booming crack. The ground shuddered faintly under their feet. Snow leapt from nearby branches in a glittering shower. Thandeka's face did not change, but her hand flexed around the axe grip on her shoulder. Namusa let out a breath he hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That's what happens when you don't respect it," Elias said quietly. "Except it lands on you. Bones don't stand up well to that." Namusa stepped forward, expression once more composed. "You fell one," she said. "We can fell the next." He hesitated. Company rules stacked up in his mind like cordwood. No unregistered hands. No strangers on parcels already counted. No changing the way things were. "You sure?" he asked. "This isn't camp talk. You do poorly, word will travel fast." Namusa's jaw set. "We carry our own shame," she said. "We don't hand it to you." Thandeka had already unrolled their axes, picking one with a slightly shorter haft, better for control. She tested the weight with a small swing. The blade catching sunlight. Elias nodded slowly toward a second marked spruce. Tall, straight, slightly leaning downslope. Yours, he said. Walk it first. Think before every cut. They moved together, no words between them, but something practiced in their shared motion. Namusa circled the trunk, fingertips brushing bark. Thandeka squinted up through the branches, reading weight and lean. They might not know these trees, but they knew how to read obstacles. Namusa took the first swing. Her stance was good. Feet planted, knees bent, shoulders loose. The axe bit cleanly, chips flying. She found rhythm fast, each stroke landing almost exactly where the last had. Elias watched the angle of the cuts, noting how close she already was to what he'd shown. Thandek watched too, head tilted, mouth a tight line. When Namusa paused to catch her breath, her sister stepped in, angling her blade just slightly differently, deepening the notch with 3 brutal, efficient strikes. They worked like that, trading off without speaking, each adjusting to the other. Within minutes, the face cut yawned open, pointing the tree toward the same cleared lane. Elias realized his hands were clenched inside his mitts. Back cut now, he said. Remember the hinge. That bit of wood between you and the sky falling. Thandeka took that job, jaw clenched, breath loud in the cold air. Her strokes were powerful, but not wild. She checked often, eyeing the depth. When the tree shivered and a fine line of separation opened behind the notch, she stepped back immediately. Enough, Namusa said. She is ready. Call it, Elias said. Namusa looked at him, then at the towering spruce. She cupped her hands around her mouth and let out a shout, not the northern timber, but a word in her own language. It rose, bright and startling. Into the cold air, the tree leaned. Snow cascaded from its crown in a glittering waterfall. It fell exactly into the lane, trunk smashing down with a crash and echo, shaking the snow beneath their boots. Silence rushed in after the sound. Even the ravens seemed impressed. Elias swallowed. Not bad, he said, understating so hard it almost hurt. Namusa's smile flashed, brief and fierce. Thandeka just nodded once, chest rising and falling. You said wood is wood, Thandeka murmured. You were right. He walked over to the fallen trunk, running a gloved hand along the cut. The hinge was near perfect. The angle of the notch clean. He'd worked with men 3 seasons who still mangled trees this straight. You'll scare some of the boys, he said. Good, Thandeka replied. They limbed the trees after that. Elias showed them how to move up the trunk, stripping branches without glancing blows. They learned fast, bodies moving with stubborn grace despite the cold. When Namusa's fingers started to stiffen, she clenched them until they obeyed. When Thandeka's shoulder began to ache, she switched hands without needing to be told. Hours passed like that, measured in trees instead of time. The sun climbed slowly, then slid sideways behind high thin clouds. Their breath smoked the air. Sweat froze in the fabric near their collars and cuffs. You work like men, Elias said finally, more to himself than to them. Namusa straightened, wiping her brow with the back of her wrist. We work like women who want to live, she said. He could not argue with that. They stopped only when the light thinned enough to make tree lines deceptive. Elias checked the tally in his head. 8 trees, cleanly dropped and limbed. Enough to make a day's count, more than enough to make a point. He felt the weight of the decision settling in his bones as they started back toward the cabin. It was one thing to let them fell trees as a test, another to march them straight into camp and say, these are workers now. Treat them as such. You said your men shut doors, he said as they trudged through the snow. They did, Namusa replied. He chewed on that for a few strides. They'll talk when they see you, he warned. They'll have names ready. None of them kind. Thandeka snorted softly. Men in red coats gave us names too, she said. They did not fit. We are still here. They might not hire you, Elias pressed. Might say you're trouble from the start. Namusa looked over at him, breath puffing white. You are trouble now, too, she said. You brought us into your woods. He huffed out a laugh that was more exhale than amusement. That was the truth of it. Whether he marched them into camp or hid them in his cabin, he'd already stepped over a line. Why me? He asked after a moment. You tried other doors. Why keep knocking? Namusa's eyes softened slightly. You had smoke, she said. Not just in the chimney. In the window. She nodded toward his lodge in the distance, a faint dark shape against the snow. Men who want to be alone keep their fires small. Men who are tired of their own faces make them bigger. He hadn't thought about it. He just liked the heat. Thandeka added. You looked at our faces, not at the snow on our boots. He had no answer for that dot by the time they reached the lodge. The sky was washing out to a pale, bruised lavender. Chimneys in the distance spat thin streams of smoke. Somewhere, a dog barked, then quieted. The world was holding its breath before night. Inside, warmth hit them like a wall. Elias set his axe by the door, then watched as Namusa and Thandeka carefully wiped their blades down with oil. Tending the steel like something sacred. You'll come to camp with me tomorrow, he heard himself say. We'll talk to the foreman. Namusa's hands paused on the haft. Will he listen? She asked. He'll listen to what brings him profit, Elias said. You drop trees like you did today. He'd be a fool not to count it. And if he is a fool? Thandeka asked quietly. Elias met her gaze. Then I'll have a different kind of choice to make. That night, the wind rose again, bringing fine dry snow scratching at the shutters. Inside, the lodge felt smaller somehow, filled with the presence of people who did not belong here and yet fit too well. The smell of sweat and pine and steel. The quiet cadence of soft speech in another tone. The faint creak of big bodies carefully fitting themselves into a space built for one. Elias lay on his bunk and stared at the ceiling, sleep slow to come. He thought of the foreman's face, lips thin, eyes always on the ledger. He thought of the company men in their wool coats, with their talk of quotas and insurance. He thought of how easily they would turn those women into numbers or problems. His throat tightened. A feeling he usually drowned with whiskey or work. Elias. Namusa's voice came softly through the near dark. He turned his head. She sat near the dying fire, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them. Thandeka slept heavy beside her, one hand still resting near the axis. Yeah? He asked. You are not like the others, she said. He snorted. You've known me one day. I know how men shut doors, she replied. I know how they open them for the wrong reasons. He waited. You opened yours, she said. Not for money, not for power, not for hunger. There was no coyness in the word, just a plain naming. You opened it because it was snowing. The honesty of it hit him harder than he expected. I was cold once, he said. Long time ago. Nobody opened their door. I still remember my hands. Namusa nodded, as if that was answer enough. You owe us nothing, she said. If your camp turns us away, we will keep walking. We have done it before. He studied her profile, lit by the low orange glow. Strong nose. Quiet mouth. These were not women built to be anyone's charity. That's the thing, he said slowly. Once someone knocks, you owe them something, even if the debt's only in your head. She considered that, then smiled faintly. Your head is heavy, Elias. Forrest does that, he replied. Maybe, she said. Or maybe it is just you. The next morning dawned hard and clear. Frost painted the window panes in intricate patterns. Elias dressed in his best bad clothes coat, mended more carefully, shirt without holes, boots freshly greased. Namusa and Thandeka bound their braids tighter, wrapped scarves around their throats, shoulders squared like soldiers walking onto a parade ground. You ready? He asked. Thandek hefted the canvas roll of axes. We came here to work, she said. We will not beg. Namusa met his gaze. There was steel there that matched the blades she carried. Whatever your foreman says, she murmured. Remember, you have already seen what we can do. He nodded once. A knot of something unnameable tightening in his chest as they stepped out into the cold toward camp. Elias knew they were walking into more than a hiring conversation. The forest was one kind of danger. Men were another. And both were about to collide in a way that would not leave him untouched. If you enjoyed, please subscribe and comment what country you're watching from. See you in the next one.